she couldn't back out of. Song Hoon cleared his throat. "I think we need to talk," he said, his voice rich with authority. This was supposed to be a private matter. Lena's head spun. Private? What was happening? She barely had time to react before one of Song Hoon's bodyguards stepped forward. "Ma'am, please," he said, his voice calm but firm. "If you're ready, Mr. Song would like to have a word." Before she could protest, Lena was guided out of the back kitchen and into a sleek black car that awaited her outside. The driver didn't speak, and the windows were tinted so dark that it felt like being in a moving vault. In the back seat, Song Hoon sat across from her, his eyes cold and calculating. Lena's stomach tightened as she tried to understand what was happening. "You're probably wondering why I'm here," he said, his voice smooth like silk. Lena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The air between them was thick with tension, and every second felt like it stretched longer than it should have. "You may not know this," Song Hoon continued, "but that little boy, my son, has a very good reason for doing what he did.
He sees things differently than most.
He doesn't just see a waitress behind a counter. He sees a protector." Lena's heart raced, her mind spinning. What kind of man was this? And why was she here, in a car with him, after an innocent joke? The car pulled to a stop in front of a grand, imposing building. The doors opened, and a bodyguard stood ready to escort her inside. Lena had no choice but to follow. As they entered the mansion, she looked around, stunned by the opulence of it all. The walls gleamed with golden trim, and everything screamed wealth. Wealth she had never known. The boy's playful proposal had just pulled her into a life she couldn't have imagined, and now it was starting to feel like she was trapped in it. But nothing had prepared her for what came next. A loud, harsh voice echoed from down the hallway. "Song Hoon." It was a woman's voice, laced with anger. "What are you doing with that girl? Don't you know what this looks like?" Lena froze, her pulse quickening. Song Hoon's expression remained cold, but his eyes flickered with something darker. "It's not what it looks like," he said calmly, his words dripping with hidden meanings. "Not yet, at least." Before Lena could ask what he meant, the door to the room opened, and another figure stepped into the light. A tall, beautiful woman in an elegant suit with a look of disdain on her face. "Madam Song," Song Hoon murmured under his breath. Lena's stomach dropped. If she thought things were complicated before, she had no idea what kind of storm was about to hit. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth and see how this story unfolds. Lena stood in the grand hallway, her legs suddenly feeling weak beneath her. She had been thrust into a world she never imagined, and it was all because of a little boy who seemed to think she could protect him from the bad guys. And now, she found herself facing Madam Song, the matriarch of the Song Empire, whose icy glare made the air feel colder, even though the mansion was sweltering with heat. "Song Hoon, what is this?" Madam Song's voice cut through the silence, sharp and unforgiving. She didn't look at Lena, not yet. Her gaze was fixed solely on Song Hoon. "You bring a common girl into my house, under the guise of a fiancé? What do you think you're doing?" Lena swallowed hard, feeling every inch out of place in the luxurious surroundings. The marble floors beneath her feet, the golden chandeliers hanging from above, the elegant tapestries adorning the walls, they were all a stark contrast to the life she had known. She had always kept to herself, working tirelessly, scraping by in the lower depths of soul. Now, she was surrounded by power, wealth, and a family who wielded both like weapons. Song Hoon didn't flinch at his mother's fury. His face remained stoic, controlled. Something about his composure made him even more intimidating than his mother's outburst. He turned his gaze to Lena for the briefest moment before returning it to Madam Song. "She's not a common girl, Mother," Song Hoon said quietly, his voice like velvet but with the weight of authority. "She's the woman who's been protecting Jiho, and that makes her someone important in our world. I don't need your approval." Madam Song's lips tightened, her face hardening like stone. "This is madness. What are you even thinking, bringing her into this family? You know the rules. This is not how things are done." Lena couldn't help herself. She'd been standing there quietly, feeling like a fish out of water, when the words finally slipped from her lips. "If you don't mind me asking," she said, voice trembling with a mix of confusion and defiance, "who exactly am I supposed to be in this family? What do you expect me to do here?" Her question hung in the air, too loud, too bold. She had no idea why she asked it or what she expected to get in return, but it felt like the right thing to say at that moment. It felt like the only thing she could say to try and make sense of everything that was happening. Madame Song turned her eyes to Lena now, her gaze cold, calculating. "You're nothing but a pawn," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "A distraction for my son. Something to calm the storm of rumors about his relationships." Lena's chest tightened. She knew she was being used, but hearing it out loud felt different. She could feel the weight of Madame Song's words, the implications hanging heavily between them. This wasn't just some wealthy family trying to protect their image. It was an empire where everything had a purpose, where people were tools in the game of power. "And I suppose you're just using me for your own game, too?" Lena asked, her voice growing more steady as she met Madame Song's icy stare. Song Hoon stepped forward, his hand on Lena's arm, as if trying to shield her from Madame Song's venom. "Enough, mother," he said with a finality that brooked no argument. "This isn't about you. This is about protecting Jiho and securing his future." "Protecting Jiho?" Madame Song scoffed. "You think a fake engagement will protect him? Do you really believe that this girl can give him what he needs?" Lena's heart pounded in her chest, her thoughts racing. What was she even doing here? The boy's playful proposal had set this entire mess into motion, but now it felt like she was in way too deep to back out. She wasn't just pretending to be engaged to a billionaire's son. She was stuck in a web spun by forces far greater than anything she could control. Song Hoon's eyes flicked over to Lena, softening just a fraction. "You have your role to play. This isn't easy for either of us, but it's necessary. For Jiho. For the family." Lena opened her mouth to respond, but she was interrupted by a soft voice. "Is she really staying here?" It was Jiho, his small voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and fear. He peeked around the corner, his wide eyes filled with anticipation. Song Hoon looked down at his son, his expression immediately softening. He reached out to ruffle Jiho's hair gently. "Yes, Jiho. Miss Lena is staying here with us." Jiho's face lit up, his earlier anxiety disappearing like a cloud parting for the sun. "Yay!" he exclaimed, running toward Lena and hugging her legs tightly, like he was the happiest boy alive. Lena bent down to hug him back, feeling a strange warmth spread through her chest. This was why she had agreed to the joke in the first place, to protect this boy who seemed to see the world with innocent optimism. But now, as her heart warmed toward him, she realized just how much she was tangled in a situation that wasn't a joke at all. As Jiho pulled away, he looked up at Lena, his innocent smile unwavering. "You'll always be my princess, right?" he asked, his voice hopeful. Lena smiled softly, her heart heavy with everything she was now caught up in. "Always," she whispered, not sure what else to say. Madame Song's voice broke through the moment, cold as ice. "You think this will solve everything, don't you? Think again, Song Hoon. You're playing with fire." She turned away, walking toward the staircase with a final glance over her shoulder. "But don't come crying to me when it burns you." Lena stood there, caught between two worlds, the world of a little boy who had only wanted to protect her, and the world of a powerful, ruthless family that she now found herself part of. Later that night, Lena lay awake in the guest room they had given her. The room was grand, far more luxurious than anything she had ever known, but it felt empty. Her thoughts were consumed by the whirlwind of events that had unfolded, her fake engagement to Song Hoon's son, Jiho's hopeful innocence, and the harsh reality of the family she had walked into. She heard a soft knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat as she stood and opened it, not knowing who would be there. Song Hoon stood there, his expression unreadable, his eyes distant but still sharp. "I want to make this clear," he said, his voice low. "You may not want to be part of this, but you're in it now. There's no turning back." Lena stared at him, unsure what to make of the sudden seriousness in his voice. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. I'm doing this for Jiho, for his future. But don't think for a second that I'm doing this out of kindness. I don't do things unless there's something to be gained. Lena's chest tightened, her mind racing. She had no idea what game she was caught in, but she was beginning to realize that she had no way out. And that was when she heard it, the faint sound of someone approaching down the hallway. She turned, her heart leaping into her throat. Was it her family? Were they here to drag her back? Her breath caught in her throat, but before she could react, Song Hoon's voice broke the silence. Stay here. Don't move. And with that, he turned and left the room without another word. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth and see how the story continues. Lena stood frozen in the middle of the grand guest room, her heart hammering in her chest. The silence that filled the air seemed oppressive, suffocating. She glanced down at her hand, still wearing the simple platinum ring Song Hoon had slipped onto her finger earlier that day. It was still strange to think of it as something other than a symbol of a ridiculous promise made by a little boy. But now, it felt heavy with meaning she couldn't yet understand. She heard footsteps outside her door and instinctively stiffened. Her eyes flicked to the door handle, her pulse quickening as the light knock echoed in the room. Without waiting for her to respond, the door creaked open, and Song Hoon stepped inside, looking every bit the powerful man he was. His suit was impeccable, and his face, while calm, held an underlying tension that Lena could almost feel in the air. Lena glanced at him, the uneasy silence stretching between them. Her mind still couldn't process the events that had brought her here, the engagement, the mansion, and the sudden shift in her life. It was like she had been pulled into a world so far removed from her own that she couldn't even recognize it anymore. What now? She finally asked, her voice breaking the silence. Her words hung in the air, heavy with frustration, fear, and a strange sense of helplessness. Song Hoon stood for a moment without speaking, his expression unreadable. When he did speak, it was calm, but there was an intensity in his voice that made her heart race. You don't belong here, Lena, he said softly, his eyes locking onto hers. But you're here now. And you're in this whether you like it or not. I didn't ask for your life to be dragged into my mess, but you've been involved by default. So the question now is, what are you going to do about it? Lena's chest tightened. She wanted to tell him to leave. She wanted to walk out and never come back to this house of opulence and control. But she knew she couldn't. The thought of her father and brother still lurking out there, threatening her every chance they got, kept her rooted in place. She had nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to. I don't know what I'm doing here, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She took a step back, her hand resting lightly on the cool surface of the desk beside her. I don't understand what you want from me, what all of this means. Song Hoon's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, but it was gone before Lena could fully catch it. You don't have to understand, not yet, he said quietly. What you need to know is that Jiho needs you. I need you. And we need to keep up the charade. The public engagement, the rumors, the headlines, they're all part of the game now. Lena shook her head, her mind reeling. A game? You think this is a game? She couldn't help the anger that bubbled up inside her. You've dragged me into a world I don't belong in, and now you're telling me I'm part of a game? Song Hoon took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. He was taller than her, his presence so commanding that it felt like the room itself shifted when he moved. He was so close now that Lena could feel the heat radiating from his body, and for the first time since they met, she could sense the weight of the man he was, the kind of man who made things happen by sheer force of will. This isn't a game, he said, his voice low and steady. This is survival. For me, for Jiho, for all of us. You think you're the only one who suffered? You think I want this life? You think I wanted to marry someone just to protect a child? Lena froze. The intensity in his words hit her like a punch to the gut. He had never shown this side of himself, this raw, unfiltered vulnerability. She didn't know what to say, so she stayed silent, her heart beating so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. Maybe this was never about us, Song Hoon continued, his gaze softening. Maybe you and I, we were always just a means to an end. But that doesn't mean I'm not invested now. I want to make this work, Lena. Lena stared at him, struggling to find the right words. She had no idea what he meant by make it work. Could he possibly mean something real? Was there more to this than just the public engagement and the media circus? She didn't know, and that terrified her. She finally took a deep breath and stepped back, her hands trembling as she crossed her arms in front of her. I can't do this, she said, her voice shaky but resolute. I can't live this lie. I can't be your pawn in some twisted game of corporate politics. Song-hoon didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped closer, closing the gap between them. You're not a pawn, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. This isn't just about me. This is about Jiho. You promised him, remember? You're the only one who can give him what he needs right now. Lena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her words from earlier. She had promised Jiho. She had promised to protect him, and now it seemed like that promise was the one thing that was binding her to this twisted reality. I didn't know what I was agreeing to, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I thought it was just a joke. I didn't know it would become this. Song-hoon's expression softened, and for the briefest moment, Lena saw something in him, something that resembled regret, maybe even pain. He exhaled slowly, his eyes flicking over her face. I never asked you for this, Lena. But now, I'm asking you to stay. For Jiho. For his future. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Lena stood there, caught in the tension of the moment. She wanted to walk away, to turn her back and never look back. But the thought of Jiho, of that innocent little boy who had thrown her into this mess to begin with, held her in place. Fine, she said, the words slipping out of her mouth before she could stop it. I'll stay. But only for Jiho. I'm not doing this for you. Song-hoon nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. That's all I need to hear, he said quietly. We'll take this one step at a time. Lena wasn't sure what that meant, but it didn't matter. She had made her decision. She would stay, but she wouldn't make the same mistake twice. She wouldn't let herself get lost in this world of power and deception. She wouldn't let her heart be swept up in something that wasn't real. But the deeper she got into the Song family's world, the harder it would be to stay out of it. Later that evening, Lena found herself walking the grand halls of the mansion again, this time with more confidence. The tension of the earlier conversation with Song-hoon still weighed on her, but she had a job to do. Jiho needed her, and that was all that mattered. As she passed by the study, she caught a glimpse of Song-hoon sitting at his desk, his back to her. He was typing away at his laptop, his face set in concentration. For a moment, Lena stood there, watching him, trying to figure out the man behind the cold exterior. But before she could walk away, Song-hoon turned, his eyes meeting hers. He didn't speak at first, but there was something in the way he looked at her, a flicker of something that made her stomach flutter, though she couldn't explain why. The next few days at the mansion were a blur for Lena. His voice low but sincere. She moved like a ghost through the house, not trusting herself to speak. One where survival was all that mattered. There was a shift, and this strange something new unspoken world between them that neither of them could deny. A world filled with wealth, fleeting, and power, before she could process surveillance. Song-hoon felt like everything about her life had been flipped upside down. Lena exhaled sharply, and she was struggling turning on her heel and heading down the hallway. She'd sit there with was no room at the breakfast table. Cutting pancakes into perfect, she had a promise to bite-sized pieces. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth nights and see what happens next. And grand adventures. The story continues. His eyes were wide with excitement as he shared his dreams of being a hero, of protecting the kingdom, of saving the day. For a brief moment, Lena would forget where she was, forget who she was supposed to be, and simply enjoy the innocence of the boy who had dragged her into this mess. But as soon as the day wore on, the reality would hit her again. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She wasn't just a girl trying to make ends meet. She was a part of the Song family now, tied to them by a fake engagement that was now becoming all too real in the eyes of the media, the public, and, most importantly, Song-hoon's mother, Madam Song. Lena had been avoiding her as much as possible. Every time they crossed paths, Lena could feel the cold, calculating gaze of the matriarch. It was a look that could freeze anyone in their tracks, and Lena wasn't immune to it. The older woman had made her dislike clear from the moment they met, but Lena couldn't bring herself to care. She was here for Jiho, and that was all that mattered. But as the days passed, things began to change. Lena found herself spending more and more time with Song-hoon, and despite her best efforts to remain detached, she couldn't ignore the tension that lingered between them. The more she saw of him, the way he carried himself, the way he spoke to people, the way he made decisions with a flick of his hand, the more she realized how much power he held, and how much of it was slipping through her fingers. It was late one evening when Lena found herself standing in the grand hallway once again. She had just finished reading Jiho a bedtime story, and her heart still ached at the thought of how fragile he was. She couldn't stand to see him in pain, but she had to admit, he was stronger than she ever gave him credit for. As she walked down the hall toward the guest wing, she heard the sound of voices from the study. Curiosity got the better of her, and she found herself standing outside the door, listening in. She knew she shouldn't, but something told her that she needed to hear this conversation. "I'm telling you, it's a mistake." Madame Song's voice rang out, sharp and angry. "This engagement, this charade, it's a liability. It's going to ruin everything we've worked for." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She didn't have to hear any more to know what they were talking about. It was her. Song-hoon's response was low, measured. "I don't care what you think. I'm doing what's necessary to protect Jiho. If this is what it takes, then so be it. I'm not going to let anyone stand in the way of what's best for him." Madame Song scoffed, her voice dripping with contempt. "What's best for him? You're letting a woman, some waitress, dictate your future? What about the family name? What about the company? What about your legacy?" "I've already made my decision," Song-hoon said firmly. "And I don't need your approval." There was a long silence, and then Madame Song's voice dropped, colder than ever. "You'll regret this. You can't just keep her around forever, Hoon. Sooner or later, the truth will come out." Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she backed away from the door, her mind spinning with the implications of what she had just overheard. She had no place in this world.
No place in the Song family.
She was a distraction, a liability, and she could feel it, like an invisible weight pressing down on her. As she turned to leave, she collided with someone strong, someone who smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. Song-hoon. He looked down at her, his eyes piercing through the dim light of the hallway. There was a flicker of something in his expression, something unreadable. But when he spoke, his voice was steady, controlled. "Lena," he said, his gaze never leaving hers. "You shouldn't be out here." Lena swallowed hard, her mind racing. "I overheard your conversation," she said, her voice shaky but firm. "I know what you think of me." Song-hoon sighed, a mixture of frustration and resignation in his eyes. "It's not that simple," he said, taking a step closer to her. "I never wanted this for you. For us." Lena shook her head, trying to push back the tears that were threatening to spill. "But it's what you want, isn't it? You just want to use me, and then throw me away when it's convenient." He stepped forward again, his presence overwhelming her. "That's not true," he said softly, his voice filled with a vulnerability that Lena hadn't expected. "I don't want to lose you." Lena took a step back, her heart hammering in her chest. "You don't even know me." "I want to," he said quietly. "I want to know you, Lena. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance." Lena didn't know what to say. Everything in her wanted to run, to get away from him, from the power, from the lies, from the game. But the way he was looking at her, there was sincerity in his eyes. It made her hesitate, made her question everything she thought she knew about herself, about her life, about the world she had been so sure she was leaving behind. Before she could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway, footsteps, hurried, frantic. A voice called out, "Mr. Song, it's an emergency." Song-hoon's eyes hardened immediately. "What now?" he muttered under his breath. He turned to Lena, his jaw clenched. "Stay here." Lena watched as he walked away, disappearing down the hallway with his bodyguards in tow. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but one thing stood out above everything else. She was in over her head. She couldn't stay here forever. She couldn't let herself be a pawn in this game of power. But what could she do? Where could she go? She had nothing. Nothing except the fake engagement, the lies, and a boy who had somehow wormed his way into her heart. Lena's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. She opened it to find Jiho standing there, his face worried. "Miss Lena, are you okay?" he asked, his small voice filled with concern. Lena forced a smile, kneeling down to his level. "I'm fine, Jiho. Just a little tired." He reached up, his tiny hand brushing her cheek. "I don't want you to go. Daddy says you're staying here forever. You'll be my family, right?" Lena's heart clenched in her chest.
She didn't know what to say.
How could she promise him something that she wasn't even sure she could keep? "Of course," she whispered. "I'll stay."
For you.
But as she looked into the boy's innocent eyes, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was slowly losing herself in this world. A world of lies, of deceit, and of people who could break her with just a glance. And that was when she realized she wasn't just trapped in this game. She was falling into it, piece by piece. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth, and see what happens next. Lena didn't know how long she'd been sitting on the balcony of the Song mansion, staring out at the sprawling city below. The skyline of Seoul, glittering with lights, felt like a distant world. A world she no longer belonged to, yet was inexplicably tied to. The weight of the engagement ring on her finger, the same one Jiho had so innocently slipped onto her hand, felt heavier than ever. The days since her conversation with Song-hoon had been a blur. The fake engagement, the press, the constant eye of the public, it was all so overwhelming. She had tried to push it all aside, but the truth was clear. She was living a life that wasn't hers. A life dictated by powerful forces far beyond her control. And with each passing day, she found herself sinking deeper into the Song family's web. Jiho was the only bright spot in this madness. His infectious smile, his unwavering belief in her, made everything feel a little less impossible. He had asked her to stay forever, and for him, she had agreed, knowing that she couldn't let him down. But Song-hoon was another story. She had tried to keep her distance from him, to avoid the growing tension between them. But every time their paths crossed, every glance they shared, it felt like something unspoken was stirring between them. Something that threatened to break the fragile walls she had built around her heart. And it wasn't just the tension that weighed on her. It was the secrets, the things that had been left unsaid. She could feel the strain in Song-hoon's voice whenever he spoke about his mother, the deep-rooted family dynamics that she couldn't quite understand. His cold exterior had cracked just once when they were alone, but even then, Lena wasn't sure if she had seen a real glimpse of him, or if it was just another part of the game they were playing. The sound of footsteps broke her from her thoughts. She turned her head to see Song-hoon walking toward her, his face set in the usual unreadable expression. His gaze softened when it met hers, and for a fleeting moment, it almost felt like the world around them faded away. "Lena," he said, his voice low and steady. "We need to talk." She stood up, not sure what to expect, but feeling the tension between them grow with each step.
About what?
He paused for a moment, looking out at the city before answering. "About what happens next." Lena crossed her arms, a defensive reflex, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "What do you mean? We've already decided what's next, haven't we?" Song-hoon turned to face her, his eyes darkening. This engagement. It's not just about Jiho. It never was." Lena's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about? You think I did this for some kind of publicity stunt?" he asked, his voice tense now. "You think I've been playing some game with you?" Lena opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. There was something in his eyes, something that made her hesitate. She had always thought of him as cold, calculated, a man who saw the world through the lens of business and power. But now, as he stood in front of her, his words carried weight that she hadn't expected. "I never wanted you to feel like you're just some pawn, Lena," he continued. "But I need you to understand something. My family, my mother, she won't let this go. This is all part of the bigger picture. She's going to keep pushing. She'll keep testing me, testing us. And sooner or later, we're going to have to face the truth of what this is." What you and I are. Lena swallowed, feeling her breath catch in her chest. What are you saying? Song-hoon took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. I'm saying that we're in this, whether we like it or not. You and I, we're connected now. This isn't just some business deal for me. It's more than that. Lena felt the world spin around her. His words hung heavy in the air, and for a brief moment, she couldn't breathe. Could it be that he wasn't just using her to protect Jiho? Was there something more, something deeper? Her heart raced as she tried to process it all. And what about you, Song-hoon? She asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound calm. What do you want from me? What's the end game here? You're playing with fire, and I'm not sure I can keep up with the heat. He looked at her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. I'm not asking you to keep up, Lena, he said softly. I'm asking you to stay with me. Not because of Jiho. Not because of any engagement. But because I don't want to lose you. The words hung in the air, like a promise unspoken, and for the first time, Lena saw the man behind the power, the fear in his eyes, the vulnerability that he had kept hidden from everyone, even himself. She felt her heart twist with a mixture of confusion, anger, and something else, something she hadn't expected. I don't know how to be part of your world, Lena whispered, her voice shaky. I don't know how to play this game. Song-hoon reached out, his hand brushing hers gently. You don't have to. You just have to trust me. Lena pulled her hand back, feeling a surge of anger rise inside her. Trust you, she echoed, her voice rising. You're asking me to trust you when you've been using me from the start? When I'm nothing more than a piece in your family's chess game.
Do you think I don't see that?
Song-hoon's expression hardened, but there was no anger in his eyes, just an understanding that made Lena pause. I never meant for it to be like this, he said quietly. I never meant for you to feel like you're being used. But the truth is, I don't know how to fix this, Lena. I don't know how to fix what's broken between us. Lena's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to push him away, to escape this world that had entangled her. But she couldn't. She couldn't turn her back on Jiho. She couldn't walk away from the little boy who had made her promise to stay, to protect him, to be part of his life. I don't know how to fix this either, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm not leaving. Not yet. Song-hoon nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. Then we'll figure it out. Together. For the first time, Lena allowed herself to believe it, allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way out of the mess they were in. Maybe for Jiho's sake, they could make this work. But as they stood there, the weight of the world pressing down on them, Lena knew one thing for certain. No matter how much they tried to escape, the game was far from over. And with every passing moment, the stakes were getting higher. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth and see what happens next.